Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time. My name is Wesley Pullen, and today I'm going to walk you through release automation, or what we call application release automation for DevOps, how to have speed and agility, and look at some key parameters or key focus points on why this would be interesting. Why is this a key trend? I work for UC4 Software. I'm vice president over a business unit focused in on what we call emerging technologies, and one of those emerging technologies is what we call application release automation. So I have limited time. This has nothing to do with marketing on UC4 or who UC4 is. We have a booth outside where you can get that information. This is strictly a presentation talking about the trends in IT and what we're seeing out there in terms of areas of interest. And I'll also leave you with a couple of points that if you're interested, your companies are interested in a release automation solution, some of these points you might be able to drive in looking at either UC4 or someone else. So this is completely just really domain focus. With that in mind, this is kind of my agenda. We'll talk about the current climate in release automation, strategy or approach to how you can resolve some of these challenges, and what are the key areas to look for if your companies are interested in really trying to deal with this collaboration between development and operations. What are the things I need to be writing down on my notepad to say, these are 5 things I need to look for in the solution, no matter who solution we end up going with. So with that, let's look at the current climate. So the challenges that we see industry-wide, be it Gartner, Forrester, any other analysts, as well as companies out there selling solution, these are kind of the top 4 categories of what I see as challenges. Coordination and planning is the one where we deal with. Oh, well, I already started. I'm sorry if I'm early, but limited time. But I see 4 areas. One is coordination and planning. What we mean by that is that we used to be able to do a deployment whenever we want, ad hoc. And the reason why is because we only did one a year. 15, 20 years ago, you weren't doing deployments, nightly builds or weekly builds. You did not do that frequency. We had one huge monolithic system, one executable. I had to get it from one location to the next, and I'm done. Deployment was rather simple. In today's world, with apps, mobile platforms, the cloud, people are doing nightly builds, nightly deployments. The frequency has increased by a magnitude of 100. There's no possible way you can wait to the end of the month or the end of the year to do that. So you have to plan these things out. Servers may be used. We might need to do a database refresh or backup. So we need the ability to plan. We need the ability to have complex dependencies. If a solution, this is a key pain point because, systems today are interdependent. So I may rely on a business tool. I may rely on Oracle or SAP or some other ERP system. It may not just be my system. My system may be one small piece of a larger system. And in that case, you have to be able to really deal with how the dependencies are and how complex they are. It might be business dependencies. It might be technical dependencies as well. Compliance controls, when we talk about government regulations in various governments, whether it be Solvency II in the UK or Sarbanes-Oxley in the United States, or Basel II or HIPAA, any of these regulatory requirements, if I'm in the healthcare industry, if I'm in government, if I'm in manufacturing, there's all kinds of different regulations that we may have to deal with. And then scalability and performance. We don't want to compromise the ability to do multiple deployments just to gain ease of use. So the easier it is to use drag and drop does not necessarily facilitate that I can do 100 or 1,000 parallel deployments. So we got to also deal with scalability and performance. These are some of the common challenges we see. A good quote, and as you can see, the Gartner plug here, but I don't work for Gartner. I thought this was an excellent quote out of an article that Ronnie Colville and George Spafford wrote with regards to challenges in what we see in configuration management and virtual and cloud infrastructures. They say 80% of the outages impacting mission-critical services are caused by people and process that they see potentially caused by people and processes through 2015. The majority of those outages, 50% plus, are caused by change in configuration, release integration, and handoff issues. That's a significant number. So this is a challenge. It's not something I'm just telling you to say, hey, look, we've got some challenges, nice presentation on it. This is something that the industry is seeing that has to be addressed. With that in mind, this is part of the reason why. I'm not sure how many of you have really spent time and are certified in agile development or any agile development practices. This is the manifesto that really began the agile movement. And what it says we've come to value here individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We come to value working software over comprehensive documentation. We've come to value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And most importantly, we've come to value responding to change, which that was not my, clicked the wrong button there. We've come to value change here over following a plan. But they do write something here. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So I've spent 20 years in software development. I started off at Rational Software with the likes of Grady Booch, Ivar Jakobsen, and Dr. James Rumbaugh. So my heart and soul is in software development, building mission-critical software systems. This was the next evolution of that, which is really taking into consideration speed, agility, the opportunity to respond to change a little bit fast versus having a paper trail of 4 or 5 months before we can really change the code and write the code. That being stated, this is what it looks like. Agile development, the heart, the tenet of it, really deals with speed. We want to be able to respond faster to the needs of the business, which is a good thing. But the challenge is speed ends up looking like this when you meet traditional IT. It's a bottleneck. So the faster I want to go, the more I need IT ops to release a little bit of control. So I need 3 VMs spun up in the next day so I can deploy these very large Java systems, and I want you to provide that to me very, very quickly. And sometimes IT can meet up to that demand, and other times they cannot. And when the two cannot come together, it looks like a traffic jam. Another way of looking at that traffic jam, let's get away from the more application of how we look in the modern world. Let's look at it from a development perspective. So what you see here on the right is kind of the silos of how companies build software systems. On the left-hand side is development. We make no money here. If we all get together today and we start developing the next evolution of the cloud, we make no money while we're in development. We only make money once it's live, once it's in production, once customers and businesses can collaborate and take advantage of it. That being said, our goal is to get from the left to the right. The challenge is there are walls. The developers and the release managers use different types of tools than your traditional IT ops person. Or they use different tools than a server admin or app server admin. So as I try to go from the left to the right, the way typical processes are done, we're using spreadsheets, emails, instant message, whether it's Microsoft Communicator or Yahoo Instant Message or some other instant message system, in order to say, can I use that server? Are you guys done with the common framework build? In development today, we usually have software elements that I write, and it integrates into a common framework or a platform. So I need to contact the team who builds the common framework and say, are you done with your version, so I can get to my piece? So that being said, you see developers, you see release managers, you see QA engineers. There's a lot of constituents involved in this concept of deployment. 20 years ago, you would see one person that was involved with deployment. Now we see a lot of constituents involved. They all have jobs, they're all extremely busy, very talented, but they use different tools. And so that's kind of the bottleneck, and that's the challenge. The way it looks at the end of the day is most companies rely on the superheroes to say, you know what, I can't worry about compliance, I can't worry about regulations. I need you to get that thing fixed in production today. So we call what's called a SWAT meeting. It's 3 a.m. I just need it fixed. So you go update the server. Don't worry about we have 5 or 10 servers in production. Don't worry about I don't know what changes you're making. I just need it fixed. I need the app to be up and running, so when we go live or turn it on at 8 a.m. Monday for our business users, we need the system fixed. So they go in, they save the day, but we don't know what they did. And so some of those changes are lost. And if any one of these individuals decides to go on vacation, or God forbid they decide to leave the company, now we are in a great deal of trouble because we don't really know the scripts and the things that they did on the servers to get them to work. So it could be a danger area for us. So now what is a strategy or an approach to how we resolve what we see these common challenges? And this strategy I'm talking about is a strategy I'm starting to see common. It's not just UC4, to be honest with you. It's a lot of companies are employing a very similar strategy on how they address it. It begins with how we define it. I'm sorry this is cut off at the end there. I'll kind of walk you through it. But you have to start defining release automation as more than just deployment. And I'll walk you through what I mean by that. Release automation or application release is adding in role-based access control. We need a consistent, repeatable, and auditable process of how we package elements and deploy them, whether it's an update or just the app from left to right, from development to production. It incorporates how we package, leveraging the existing scripts and adding in some new templates. It leverages dependencies. You have to model those dependencies. We don't want just the experts to know, well, I need this JDK version. I need this patched version of Oracle. I need my system to know that. It incorporates deployment, which a lot of tools have been doing for 20 plus years. It incorporates the entire team through promotion. All the team members need to be involved, not just the developers and operations IT people. We need QA and release engineers. And finally, we don't want to disregard your documentation standards or adherence to your rules and regulations. It needs to be compliant. So let me give you an example. If my only objective today is to get one example, hopefully I'll get this clear. Let's say my only goal is to move this glass of water from here. Sorry I had to walk. To over here. Now, if I have to do that once per day, I don't need automation. I can do that once time a day. I can come in here, I move the cup over, and I'm done. Who cares? That's the way it was 20 years ago. I only have to do it once, so I can write a script to do that. I don't need software. I don't need to pay 50,000 euro, 100,000 euro, 200,000 euro. I can pay literally almost zero other than my cost to move the cup. I'm done. Then I get promoted now, and they say, Wesley, we're going to migrate up to now the year 2002, and I need you to move the cup of water from this table to this table. I don't know if that table's sturdy. I don't know if the screws are in tight. I don't know if it'll break down. I don't care. I'm just going to move the cup over there 5 times a day. That's easy. Then I get promoted and say, I want you to do it 10,000 times a day in all of the Gartner events simultaneously. Now I need automation because it's impossible for me to count and do that 10,000 times a day while also validating if I do it, does one of these break down in the process? Have I validated that the requirements to hold that cup are met in that system? When we did that, most companies out there just focus in on this area of deployment. There are hundreds. And if all you care about is deployment, don't pay anybody anything. I say go open source. If all you care about is deployment, moving the cup over, I don't care about validating, I don't care about dependencies, I don't care about compliance for my team, I don't want my team involved. I just want one engineer to move the cup, then all you need is deployment. You go open source, and there are quite a few that you can check on yourselves. You don't need me to tell you that. But if I care about something beyond deployment, I'm a little bit more concerned about some of these other aspects, then I don't say go open source. I say look at a solution that will allow you to gain all of these tenets. Okay? So that's how, if we define it this way, then deployment is an aspect of application release automation, but it is not the end of application release automation. It's just a component of it. Okay? That being stated, what are the 3 critical components? And I call this end-to-end visibility. No matter what solution you employ, I think there are 3 things that you need to walk away with this presentation today that you must have that will meet up to what we defined. Number 1, planning. You need the aspect of being able to have a calendar and not Microsoft's Outlook calendar, although I do like Microsoft Outlook for human capital negotiation. I can see where you're at, sir. I can see where you're at. I can see what meetings you got. That's great. I want the same thing for my servers. I want the same thing for the activities that are taking place on my servers or my hosts. I want to be able to see who's doing what. So if I have a maintenance window and I need to take down the servers, I don't want my team trying to deploy on those servers. I want the ability to see my releases for the next month or the year all planned out, and which servers you're going to do it on and how long will it take and what are the tasks. That's planning and adding in those modeling, those dependencies. That's planning. The control aspect is a reservation system. I believe you should have a reservation. I shouldn't have to instant message the guy over there and say, excuse me, is your table sturdy enough? Do you have 80% CPU or less? Do you have this JDK version? Do you have this Oracle? I should be able to have a system. The technology should do all that for me. And if this table is not sturdy enough, it should automatically go provision me another table within the time that I need to do it to hold the cup. And then when I'm done, I can decommission it. That way, we don't unnecessarily pay Amazon Web Services, rack space, or Teradata money or Terramark money that we don't need to pay them. So you need the ability to control the environment and provide access and compliance. And finally, this is what we talked about a little bit earlier. We need the aspect of deployment. Deployment is key. I do agree that deployment is a major factor. It's just not the only factor. In that deployment, we need rollback. We need snapshotting, the configuration. In other words, before I deploy the glass, before I move it over, I want to take a snapshot of all the screws, the length, the sturdiness, the stability of it. And that way, if something happens, I got a snapshot of what I did so I can roll back to that snapshot. I can look at the delta. I can snapshot here, look at a comparison so that if I made any changes and it broke it, I know exactly what to make those changes. So in other words, if part of my deployment task is to deploy a Java app and to patch Oracle, and the Java app broke, why do I want to remove the patch from Oracle? I want to keep the patch from Oracle, but remove the Java app and get the right package. So smart, intelligent deployments, smart and intelligent snapshotting of the environment. So when we go back to those common challenges, if we employ a solution that talks about those three components, it should look like this. So for coordination and planning, we add in the right release calendaring and environmental controls. For complex dependencies, I believe you need two key areas. Please write that down. Dependency mapping. I don't want just my developers, the experts, to know that you need this JDK version, you need this version of Tomcat, oh, you need this CPU, oh, it runs these 5 services on the system, and these services have to be set up this way. I want the software to know that so your team doesn't have to always run in and try to fix it at the last minute. I want application-aware deployment. This is another way for having pre-built templates. I'm deploying to ServiceNow. I'm deploying to Oracle. I'm deploying to Oracle Retail. I'm doing OEBS. I'm doing SAP. I'm doing Java. I'm doing .NET. Shouldn't somebody by now have templates that say, here's drag and drop capability to make that happen? I mean, come on, we've been scripting and doing this stuff for years. It's time to provide the templates so that everybody can benefit from this to move a little bit quicker. So that's the application-aware deployment. That you know the application and you're familiar with it. Compliance controls, auditing and approval. It's great to be able to, you should be able to go to one system and say, give me a compliance report. Who did what in the last week? Your last release, print out a report and tell me what's going on in the system. Versus going to 5 systems and say, well, I get a report from you and then another report from you and then another report from you. And then finally, scalability and performance. Some things should be done sequentially, other things we need to do in parallel. We need speed. I just said this a little bit earlier about the Agile Manifesto. We need speed, and so parallel deployment tasks and deployment estimates. So an estimate is basically saying, okay, you've done this same deployment 15 times over the last month. Why is it slower now? So give me an estimate of how long it takes so I can begin to plan and schedule, and if something deviates from that estimate, you need to tell me why, what happened, what's on the box or what's causing it to take a longer period of time. And the final result should look like this. So instead of the experts, we keep the experts. Their knowledge is vital. This doesn't replace human knowledge and human ability. What it does is it enhances it. It gets them to get their wisdom in the system, and then the system goes out and does the appropriate changes, because now we can run a compliance report here versus here. Go into this guy and say, hey, can you tell me all the changes you made like last week when we did a deployment? He'll give you 5 out of his 15, if he can remember. But this system will print out everything he did, and everything he did, and everything she did, and all the likes. And it makes it simpler and makes it easier. So with that, I promised you, and I'm almost right on the key here, some key areas to look for in an application release automation solution. I just tried to give you 5. There are more, There are many companies out there that have their own little document that says if you're looking for a release automation solution, you need to look for this, this, and this, and this. So I kind of went to all 100 and said, you know what? Let's agree on something. Let's at least agree on the top 5. So here's my top 5 that I think I see for elements to look for in a solution. Number 1, easy to use, easy to leverage UI. What that means is web-based, drag and drop, that allows for faster return on investment. You have developers like me. I don't like UIs. I like APIs and command line interface. I'd rather program it. But you do need a UI for various constituents. A release manager, a QA manager. Maybe you have operations staff in there. So you do need a UI. The second point that I think I would like to mention about a solution that is really, really key is pre-built templates. We mentioned that. It should have at least a few hundred pre-built templates to cover Tomcat, WebLogic, IBM WebSphere, Portal, JBoss, Geronimo, ServiceNow, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Depending on your environment, there should be some pre-built templates, and if they don't have it, they should be able to write it, to provide the pre-built templates. Dependency mapping or dependency modeling. I think this is one of the key ones that eliminates the finger cross deployments. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. Finger cross deployments is instead of me walking the glass over there, I'm too afraid, I throw it and I cross my fingers and hope it lands and none of the water spills and the application works. We call that finger cross deployments, and finger cross deployments can work sometimes, but they don't work all the time. And when they don't work, we tend to blame and say, well, whose fault is it? Well, it's because Gartner gave me a messed up glass, or there was too much water in the glass. Somebody poured too much water. We start looking for the excuses versus I just threw it over there. And then parameterization is the one packaged element. So I want one package but multiple targets. And then finally, scalability we covered is the ability to have scalability. I think the ladies, what we're going to do is I'm at the end, which is perfect. I'm at the end, and I wanted to give some time. We've got about 8.5 minutes. I want to provide some opportunity for you to ask some questions. So we have the ability for you to either write it down and bring it to the young lady here, or that way I can restate your question, or we can do the microphone and you can yell out your answers, whatever you prefer. But from the content perspective, I'm done, but I do want to open it up for some questions for you. Wow, no questions. I either completely was off. Okay, we do have one. Great.
Where do you think the SEM solutions, the enterprise SEM solutions, and application release automation begins?
Ooh, that's a good one. So, coming from that rational world, my days at IBM Rational. So, the SEM solution. So when I look at a software factory, this is the Wesley Pullen way of looking at the software factory. When I build an automobile, I have raw materials. There are raw materials, then there's the processes of the factory, and then I get a product that comes out. The SEMs of the world, the configuration management, it's raw materials. It's my vault. It allows me to store my source code. It allows me to store documents and things like that. But that's my raw material. For application release automation, they begin at storing the artifacts that are critical to the enterprise. Their IP, their intellectual property, which is their code. From a software perspective. But they end at the statement of trying to say, okay, and they can do build management too, to build those elements together and integrate them. But when it comes to actually doing the deployments and providing the compliance and all those other things, I would say they end at the stage of doing the check-in, check-out feature, and then application release automation meets SCM at the point of building a pre-built template to go in and do a checkout only of those artifacts based on the right label and version to say, okay, here's the artifact I need for my package to do this release. Because an SCM solution is not going to give you a calendaring. They're not going to do environmental controls. They're not going to do dependency mapping. Their goal is to do build management in some cases, but really to give you the vault. It's the repository, if you will, for your code. So I see them, so the clear cases or the, Perforce, or you can go down the list, or Dimensions from Serena, I see them as the vault. And those technologies are great for doing source code or documentation or artifacts and putting it in a vault and allowing the team to kind of leverage those artifacts. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other thoughts, questions? We still got a few more minutes. Okay, that's good. So hopefully you got something from it. I guess there's no more questions, so we can conclude. And do I get money for ending 5 minutes early? No, I'm just kidding. We're ended 5 minutes early, so you guys can get that time and enjoy. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it.